America. We are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. At Grand Canyon University, we believe in equal opportunity, and the American dream starts with purpose. By honoring your career calling, you impact your family, your friends, and your community. The pursuit to serve others is yours. Find your purpose at Grand Canyon University. Private, Christian, affordable. Visit gcu.edu.
Hi, everybody. It's Liam. This week's episode of Die Hard on a Blank is about the film The Last Boy Scout, which, if you've seen it, you know it has some explicit language, and we quote it explicitly, particularly at the very start of this episode. So if you happen to be around someone and you don't want them to hear that language, now would be the time to press pause and come back and listen at another time. Either way, we hope you enjoy this week's episode on the late, great Tony Scott's film, The Last Boy Scout.
Welcome to Die Hard on a Blank, the podcast where we explore the influence of Die Hard on action cinema, one action movie at a time. Today's film is The Last Boy Scout. It's Die Hard in an LA noir. I could not be more excited to discuss this movie. I'm Philip Gawthorne, and with me is my co-host
Liam Billingham, but he's asshole and I'm fuckface.
Yay!
We would have to cut that out. I don't know how that's going to go over.
Not. Actually, but before we start, I do need to ask something that is a little bit more serious, which is to do just a sort of security concern. Because did any of you stupid shits bother to frisk this? Fuck!
Do you guys have 4 hours? Because I think
Strap
that's where
in,
we're
baby.
heading.
I am so pumped for this movie. Oh boy.
Phil, do you like the last?
It's okay.
Do you like Last Boy Scout?
I think this movie is like I unapologetically love this movie.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. There are problems with it. Let's just get this off the table. This is a rampantly misogynistic movie.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Okay, that's dealt with. That's
Right,
not great.
It is.
Okay?
It is at times hard to watch.
It's really, really bad. That aside, I absolutely love this film. I think it's genuinely an amazing confluence, a sort of, in the best possible way, a kind of collision, a crash of, all of these iconic figures that we're talking about. Joel Silver, Shane Black, Bruce Willis, Tony Scott, all of these legends.
The GOAT, Tony Scott.
Don't get me... Actually, do get me started. Do get me started, because I could talk about him, indefinitely.
Is there any more...
He's such a hero to me.
For me, personally, in a weird, almost tangential way, there's probably few filmmakers that matter more to my, historical love of film than Tony Scott, because, we can get into it, but just, starting with Top Gun and... Top Gun, this film a little later, but the fact that he directed True Romance, which is a really important pivotal movie if you're coming of age in the Tarantino sense, and then Crimson Tide, he's always been there in some sense. Just a god. And during the pandemic, I went on a bit of a tear and I watched some of the later stuff I hadn't seen since it came out. I watched his Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3 for the first time, which I think
I love.
rocks.
I think it's awesome.
It's really, really good. The original is a classic sort of My Dad and I movie, and the remake is sick. I mean, it's really, really
I love
good.
both movies. Yeah. Tony Scott means more to me probably than any other filmmaker. There's a number of reasons why. One, he was a working class lad from the north of England who didn't have any lineage, didn't have any connections. Yeah. Just him and Ridley did it through sheer force of will and talent. And he's made, the best thing I can say maybe about, there's a million things I could say, but he's made more movies I love than any other filmmaker. Mm-hmm. There's probably 15 to 18 films. And not most filmmakers, 5 maybe, that I absolutely love this movie.
Yeah.
Maybe 10. Mm-hmm. For someone that's been around for Ridley, someone that's been around for 40 odd years.
Well, Ridley Scott is also the most prolific human being alive as a filmmaker.
But not many directors actually make enough films for you to love that many films. Yeah. But with the exception of 1 or 2, I love everything Tony has ever done, and I think he is a true artist. People think of him, and he, in the 80s. The vibe and around Tony was more, it's commercial,
I was going to say, he kind of was always the little brother to Ridley Scott. Ridley Scott made art and Tony Scott made like
look at
action
Tony's
pictures.
first movie, The Hunger, right? And there's a guy who I want to talk about a little bit called Larry Taylor, who wrote a great book about Tony called Filmmaker on Fire. And he's also just done one about McTiernan that I'm reading right now.
Is this your brother? Are you guys related?
I've got nothing at stake here other than the fact that I just think he's written two great.
No, I only bring it up
books.
because it's completely in your wheelhouse. Your dad's Joel Silver, and this guy's your brother.
But one of the things that he identified in his book about Tony is he went between. He would do, say, this first film was The Hunger, which is a very artistic movie. With
Beautiful
David
movie.
Bowie
I saw
and
it
Catherine
last movie I
Deneuve,
saw
and
before the pandemic. 35
It's an artistic
millimeter.
vampire movie. Susan Sarandon, really, really interesting. But night and day to his next movie, Top Gun, right, which is super slick and commercial and a studio picture and yada yada. But what's interesting that Larry Taylor identified in his book is that Tony would move between these very, like, he would do these strange, esoteric, very dark, very painterly artistic movies in between the blockbuster, commercial films. Like he would movies like Revenge with Kevin Costner.
Oh yeah, No Way Out.
Movies like The Fan, which I absolutely love. No one seems to agree with me on that, or not many people do. I again, and not in any kind of ironic way. I think The Fan is kind of a masterpiece.
What is it about Tony Scott that appeals to you so much?
As I say, I think he has this artistic, painterly. A painterly approach to action in terms of his like the beauty of the images, the beauty of the colors. He has an incredible sense of pacing. He has an incredible eye for casting. Think about like Jack Black in his small part in Enemy of the State that like leaps
Oh my
off the
God!
screen.
Oh yeah!
He often
Enemy
has
of the State. Yeah.
small people who have small parts and they go on to. One of the things I love about the Scott brothers is that they would have actors in small parts in one movie, and then in the next movie they get a little bigger part, and then they get a little bigger part, and they kind of reward the people that have worked for them before,
like a family
and stuff. I love that. There really is, and that's the sense I get about the company as well. And I've got to know his assistant a little bit over the last few years, who's told me some amazing stories about Man on Fire in particular, and the shooting in Mexico when they shot the movie down there, and this crazy stories.
Crazy stories. Yeah.
So to me, there's so many reasons why. I just love his work so much. And he's just so entertaining. But everything he's done is entertaining or interesting or visually like dazzling in some way. But the other thing that I think is really not spoken about enough about Tony is there's moments in his movies that are so humanistic. That this movie's a little bit darker. It's a bit more nihilistic. But he has a
little bit.
He has a real deft touch for these delicate human moments. There's a moment that always, I don't know why, it makes me choke up in Deja Vu, where what's the name?
Bruce Greenwood?
Bruce Greenwood's character, who is like the
great actor.
I think he's the FBI head or whatever. And Val Kilmer has bumped into Denzel Washington while he's investigating the terrorist attack that kickstarts the movie. And they're discussing, like, should we bring him into this sort of secret operation that we're doing? And they review his resume, and he's like, he's kind of a loner, and he sort of does his own thing, and this is his reputation. And there's just a moment where Bruce Greenwood says to Kilmer, do you like him? And Kilmer goes, yeah. And it's just like those kind of moments that to me are like, that's such an unusual moment. He has a real gift for that. There's some moments like that in Unstoppable that he are so moving to me. Yeah. This is so, I don't know.
Well,
Unstoppable,
Unstoppable actually I only encountered during the pandemic. It was part of my Tony Scott deep dive. And I was like, wow, particularly the first, I think it's a great movie, but particularly the first 45 minutes of Unstoppable, I'm like, this is a perfect setup. This movie is perfect for the first 45 minutes. And it's partially my love of like sort of setup more than resolution, as like, so I like watching all the gears, get going in a movie, literally in that movie. But I just think it's amazing. And I think you mentioned Deja Vu, and that was another rewatch. I saw that in the theater. And I remember, I think this happened with a few Tony Scott movies. There was this kind of like, oh yeah, sure. Like that was good. I think some people We're just kind of like, oh yeah, Tony Scott's up to his old tricks again, which wasn't necessarily bad. And now I think people are like, wow, this guy invented a visual language that like he really is, there's a lot of writing on the internet among, sort of film writers about like the way images have changed with digital cinematography. And it always dwells on, rightfully so, people like David Lynch and Michael Mann, who really, really are pivotal to like, films like Public Enemies or The Inland Empire, like sort of rethinking kind of how we shoot
Visual
with
aesthetic,
visual
yeah.
aesthetics. And I think Tony Scott has played a pivotal role in that. He sort of like helped invent music videos in some ways, and the way cuttings and commercials. And I just
Came
think
from that world, yeah.
And I think Deja Vu's it's not the movie we're talking about, but it has a really interesting impact in terms of like looking at screens and the way that we think about things. I just think he's like a bit of a genius in that I think he uses technology and storytelling in this very avant-garde way imagistically. I think Domino is an example of a movie that kind of like pissed people off imagistically when it came out, and now feels like, oh yeah, that's what we were revving up for in our era.
And he would take kind of crazy risks like that, because I think he was, people don't realize that the man was an artist.
Right.
Not just a commercial tour de force filmmaker.
Right.
He really was an artist, and he would push the envelope. And as you're saying, he like pushed the medium forward, so in so many ways. And I think now people are looking back and kind of realizing like what a gift he was to the world and to filmmaking. Honestly, I could really get emotional about it because I got to know his assistant, who's now a big exec at Scott Free, and
well, it's also tragic.
He's a wonderful man,
right? And there's something tragic about what happened to him. And I mean, it's the amazing thing is we have this legacy of absolutely amazing cinema, and I think look, let's just talk about a absolute, and also an absolute bruiser of a movie here.
Yeah.
Should I give us some
Need to get
fast
back on
facts?
track
It's
here.
okay. Should I give us some fast? Hey, that's what we're here for. Should I give you some fast facts on The Last Boy Scout?
Please do.
Okay. And then we can maybe talk about do you like Shane Black? What are your feelings about him? The Last Boy Scout was released by Warner Brothers in the United States on December 13th, 1991. Just a few scant months, less than two, from our last film, which was Ricochet. It was directed by Tony Scott and produced by Joel Silver and Michael Levy. Again, did he produce Ricochet?
Yes.
Wow. So it's
And Die Hard 2.
These guys had a busy 91.
Oh my gosh.
It stars Bruce Willis, Damon Wayans, and Chelsea Field. The screenplay is by Shane Black, based on a story by Shane Black and Greg Hicks. It was made on an estimated budget of $43 million and it grossed $114.5 million at the box office. Regarding the screenplay, this is like one of the biggest screenplay sales in at least that history. It was sold for like what,
1.75 million at the end, but it actually had a higher offer, I believe, I think it was from Carolco, that he didn't take because he wanted to work with Joel and Warner Brothers again because he had a good experience on.
That's
Lethal Weapon.
about the level I'm.
And
fielding.
they were close,
Him and
Silver, yeah.
Yeah, and that's sort of the numbers that I'm fielding for this
Still are.
podcast right now. That's what I'm trying to. I'm getting us up to $1.8 million. That's what I'm trying to do right now.
It's pretty amazing, and we can talk about the screenplay, which I read this week, and I'm pretty familiar with. But what's your personal history with this movie?
So, I grew up with action movies as a kid, right? And I had a cousin, I think it was my cousin Chris or Craig, who one day was like, "Hey, Liam, come here." This was like a family Thanksgiving or something like that. He's like, "I want to show you the first scene of Last Boy Scout." And he showed it to me, and we'll get into the first scene of Last Boy Scout because I think it's the greatest thing Tony Scott ever directed. The absolute barnstormer of an opening scene of a movie.
Talk about
and
a
it
grabber.
Scared the shit out of me.
Yeah.
And I think I never saw the rest of the movie until only like 5 or 6 years ago. And now I've seen it 2 or 3 times. I have a really strong relationship with Tony Scott and obviously Joel Silver and Bruce Willis, a lot of the people in this movie, but this one is like a later in life discovery. And I mean, like you said, I love it. It's so watchable. And there's so many incredible things about it. Similar to our last film, Ricochet, though in entirely a different way, there's some icky things that you have to contend with when you watch this movie. But in terms of like gloriously nihilistic dirtbag action cinema with some real, I would say, interesting thematic and historical ideas
Massively.
about Los
Massively.
Angeles.
Yeah.
Is pretty incredible. You know, you said earlier it's Die Hard and an LA Noir.
Yeah.
And I really, really am excited to unpack that. But we should say this is a little different from our Die Hard on the Blank formula. So, Phil,
It is.
real quick.
It is.
Real quick. What's
Yeah.
the Die Hard on a Blank formula?
Okay. So,
Okay. Feels like I'm getting awfully tired of being asked this question on this podcast.
for the uninitiated, Die Hard on a Blank is the cultural or industry shorthand for any movie that utilizes this particular storytelling paradigm of bad guys take over a blank. Bus, boat, oil rig.
Right.
We should come up with something really wacky for what it could be.
Cruise line.
Bouncy castle.
My daughter would love that.
Circus. And it's up to one
Democratic National Convention.
And it's up to one man or woman to save the day. This movie does not fall into that category from a story design perspective. And typically, just a quick sidebar on this, because it's an LA Noir, it's also a buddy movie. Now, for the
What's
most
a buddy
part,
movie?
So
Buddy cop movie.
and this isn't buddy cop
Actually,
per
it's
se.
not a
although
buddy cop movie.
It's often kind of folded into that category. But buddy movies are usually two mismatched individuals who don't get along at first, but have to team up for a common goal, often solving a case.
What's the best one? What's the
this.
best? Okay, podcast cancel. No, I think the sort of Die Hard corollary
Obviously,
to this is Lethal Weapon
and 48
hours
hours that precedes it. Both Joel Silver movies.
Tango and Cash. Gothorn and Billingham.
Fuckface and asshole.
That's the subtitle.
Now they're not the same formula usually. They usually take place over a longer period of time, several days or weeks, as opposed to the compressed timeline that's usually the case with a Die Hard on a blank scenario. They usually take place over multiple locations as opposed to being focused around a single location like a skyscraper, boat, bus, plane, what have you. But we
Bouncy
had to bouncy castle. But we had to make an exception. I mean, this is on a case by case basis, but in this instance, we had to make a special exception because there is just too much Die Hard DNA to ignore.
It's got big Die Hard vibes.
It certainly does. I mean, obviously, the most obvious one being, of course, Bruce Willis.
So let's talk about the Die Hard DNA.
So yes, we have Mr. Willis returning to play a detective, albeit a private detective.
With one of the greatest introductions in action movie history.
Yeah.
Sleeping in a car, except that he pulls a gun on a bunch of kids. But that is the gleefully bad taste from which this movie was made.
So yes, in addition to Bruce Willis, we also have Joel Silver, of course, and that means that we have many of the usual suspects on his payroll back, including composer Michael Kamen, costume designer Marilyn Vance, stunt coordinator / second unit director Charles Picerni, who interestingly, I realized on my last viewing of Die Hard appears as the guy driving Dwayne T. Robinson in the car.
Oh, really?
And he did Roadhouse, and he's like the stunt guru.
Yeah, I recognize the name.
Stuff.
It's fun now to watch. By the way, I mean to tell you, I'm watching these movies now, and I see names. I'm like, oh,
yeah. You kind of dial into this.
Yeah,
weird
you sort of get
frequency.
into the Joel Silver verse.
Yeah. Also has an appearance by king of comedy cameos Rick Ducommun as the
gets
pool owner.
Blown away, baby. Another good name for this movie is Blown Away, because everybody gets blown away in this movie.
So yeah, Rick Ducommun plays the guy who's like chilling at his house when the car crashes into his pool.
Now, we previously saw him in Die Hard as
he's the city worker. Who's the guy who's like Robert Davis trying to make him turn off the power.
I can do it from here. I have the controller right now. Yeah, that guy.
He's hilarious. He's in Groundhog Day. He's in Hunt for Red October as the guy telling the puke story. He pops up a lot, always really funny. It's written by Shane Black, who has a peripheral but critical connection to Die Hard.
Which is what?
Well, do you know what Black's original title was for this script?
Die Hard.
Yes.
Did he know that?
So basically, he'd been working on this script for a while.
Yeah.
He's obviously tight with Joel Silver. They'd done Lethal Weapon together, and he was...
you mean the greatest buddy cop movie of all time?
Yes. Yeah, no, so yeah, of course.
No, you're right. It might be Lethal Weapon 2.
I'm a big 3 guy, actually.
3 is...
I love 3. I really do.
They are all good.
Yeah.
They are all good.
So
various shades of good, but they are all good.
Yeah, they're all great.
Lethal Weapon podcast?
Isn't that what we're doing? Yes, basically, so Shane Black is working on this script that at the time is called Die Hard, which about this character. That is mentioned to Joel Silver at some point, and he asked him if he could use the title for the Bruce Willis skyscraper action movie he was doing, and Shane agreed.
I kind of forgot about that.
So he retitled it, which I think is also an amazing title.
Last Boy Scout is an amazing title.
There's so much in that.
Yeah.
That speaks to this theme of heroism.
Right.
You know, in a
there are no heroes left,
in a broken world. Yeah, exactly. And that's a line from Lethal Weapon.
Yeah.
You know, it's a recurring obsession, I think, in Black's work is the nature of heroism and analyzing it in a world where heroes are scarce.
Well, and also masculinity, I think, is an interesting theme of Joel Silver's work. Now.
Yes.
Lots to talk about here. Lots to talk about this movie. I think we should just jump right in to our anatomy of an action movie. Now, the anatomy of the action movie are the categories that we use, that Phil invented. They are the 5 tenets, we live in a twilight world, of which we use to define an action movie. And Phil has given the film Die Hard A+, full marks, extra credit, gold star, whatever you want to call it. He's given that film all the awards. So we are going to seek to compare this film, which is a lot in common with Die Hard, to that film. Phil, will you tell us the 5 tenets of the anatomy of an action movie?
Yeah,
I'm so
6.
sorry,
Yeah,
6. Why do I always do that?
5 would be better because it's a nicer number.
Yeah, I have an occasional 7th, but I don't know if it works with this movie.
Not so much for this one.
Let's hear him.
All right, so there is the premise, the plot or conceit of the movie, the ticking clock, the story engine that gives the events urgency, the hero or heroes in this case, the villain or villains in this case, the action, i.e. set pieces, stunts, memorable sequences.
And a little maybe the filmmaking. Can you talk about that a little bit there?
The filmmaking craft. And finally, the humor, which this film has in abundance. So this is going to be pretty high scoring, I would say.
Sometimes you choke on the jokes, but it's funny.
Yeah, that's well put. So, okay, should we start with the premise?
Let's start with the premise.
Okay, so Last Boy Scout, the premise of this movie is that 2 fallen heroes team up to investigate the murder of an exotic dancer and unearth a massive labyrinthine conspiracy involving a corrupt US senator and a villainous football team owner. So that's the kind of super top-line summary, but where the story goes is it's quite a serpentine investigation. It has a lot of at
times borderline incomprehensible until it sums itself up, which
that's
I think is a great
That's often the way with Black's stuff. I think that especially I would say Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, where it's almost
good movie,
it's almost impossible to tell what the plot is,
or the nice guys,
but it doesn't even matter because the repartee is so fun, and the movie is so fun. I think it's almost like, because from my sense of Shane Black is someone that just has devoured and absorbed, Pulp Fiction, paperback detective novels.
Yeah,
to the
man
point
after my own
so
heart.
Second nature to him, and he loves these tortured plots. And so, you're a big LA noir guy, right? I'm
just a big noir guy. Yeah, I love a noir. Love a noir.
Okay, so tell me about that.
Well, I think
what's a noir for those who don't know?
So a noir is French for black. Right? And Shane Black. Is that his real name?
No reason to believe it isn't.
Yeah, and I'm just curious because it's coincidental.
That is
interesting. And they sort of emerged in the post-war period. This is very simple, where often it's attributed to GIs coming back from the war, having witnessed the horrors that they had seen in that period, and sort of a new strain of fiction emerges, a new strain of writing, which is usually there's a protagonist, often a police officer, or I think much more accurately, private detective, someone who is not affiliated with the state apparatus, setting out to solve some kind of mystery. And often that will involve some powerful figures, often maybe a U.S. senator or maybe a mob boss, or maybe in the case of like Dashiell Hammett's the Continental Op books, sort of the figures in a town. And it's often the protagonist is somewhere between various power structures or figures that exist. It can be as small as in the case of Maltese Falcon. Sam Spade, who's the protagonist of that, is dealing with it's this sort of ruthless antiques buyer and his sidekick. And there's always a femme fatale, meaning a woman who has a vested interest in what's going on, who often seduces and causes the protagonist to fall in love with her before pulling the rug out from under his eyes and reinforcing what is often a cynical worldview that the protagonist holds both at the beginning and at the end of the story. That was kind of an off-the-cuff summation of what a noir is.
Pretty darn good.
An LA noir is a little different because noir is often associated with darkness. You know, New York has some great noirs. That's a great, that's a town that I would think of as a noir kind of place. But an LA noir is characterized, I think, by the sun, by the fact that it takes place not in the dark light of a northern cold city, but like in the sort of bruising heat of LA. A couple broad noirs that I would consider watching is there's The Maltese Falcon, which is one of my favorite films of all time, directed by John Huston, who, I'm jumping around a little bit here, but made documentary films during World War II, and that experience changed him. That's a great example. I think Night Moves, the Gene Hackman film in the 70s, is a great film noir. Killing of a Chinese Bookie, we've talked about on this podcast. But I think, for film people, the quintessential LA noir is Chinatown, which is a 1970s film about Jack Nicholson playing... How you feel about The Last Boy Scout is how I feel, and I think a lot of people feel about Chinatown.
I think it owes a lot to Chinatown.
So
this movie,
and
right?
so that I want to get into that. So very briefly, Chinatown is about a private detective named J.J. Gittes who gets hired to take photos of a man by his wife who believes he's having an affair. And the man he's taking pictures of is named Hollis Mulray. And Hollis Mulray is the chief engineer at Water and Power in LA. And if you know anything about the history of LA, you know that the history of Southern California is the history of water in this country. And it basically, over the course of the film, J.J. Gittes becomes embroiled in sort of a scheme related to water before the movie takes a very, I would say, disturbing turn into being about family and almost Oedipal levels of psycho-terror for family. And before ending in a very tragic way, it's an amazing movie. I think one of the 70s is probably the high watermark for American cinema in many people's opinion. And this, along with some of the more obvious, films
The Long Goodbye as well around that time, right?
The Robert Altman film with
Philip Marlowe.
I love
character.
that movie. Yeah, there's just a lot of great film noirs that emerged post-war. I mean, that's the era. And then there's Kiss Me Deadly from the 50s. A lot of really great movies and a lot of great books.
Last Boy Scout is in this tradition. Built on that foundation.
And I think the best place to start is the first scene of this movie. So I just went on a little bit of a rant, but will you describe the first, let's say, sequence of The Last Boy Scout?
Sure. So basically, the movie begins with a sequence that I did want to talk about, which is the credit sequence.
Yeah.
And I cannot tell if that is satirical or not.
It's Paul Verhoeven-esque again. There's a silver element.
It's basically, it's Bill Medley from the Righteous Brothers doing quite a tacky pop song that's Friday night's a great night for football.
Phil actually has an album out where he just covers that 8 times in different styles.
It hasn't sold anything yet, but I'm hopeful the time will turn soon.
I'll buy a copy.
So it's a very sort of tacky razzmatazz Americana. That's another thing I've really found interesting about Tony's work is the way that he shoots Americana with the outsider's eye that makes it glamorous, and really does the same thing with like how he can make the telephone poles of Oklahoma look like the most beautiful and interesting place, because as Brits we have that outside, we look at America through a slightly different lens. So there's this weird kind of sequence.
I think it's satirical.
I'd like to think so, because funnily enough, if you watch Sunday Night Football on NBC, it's not a million miles away from the intro to it.
Well,
it's
there's
waiting all night for
and electric guitars, like kind of depending, like Americana in all its glory and mediocrity and tack.
It's America.
It's
America,
and there's nothing more American than football, American football, which is what.
And this is sort of about that. That's why it's interesting. I think you have this British director into some extent skewering or looking at this world from the outside. So we have basically, the film begins with this very glamorous, sort of glossy, fun pop song that's celebrating football.
It's like
and
Monday
how
Night Football, but
right.
the Monday Night Football, are you ready for some football? But it's
Geeing
a Friday
everybody
night.
up. And then it cuts to the complete opposite, which is pouring rain, Cleveland.
Yeah, smash cut.
Super dark, very noir,
monsoon.
very noirish
Yeah.
lighting in this scene. Very, very almost German expressionism.
It's hard to, well, it's just so dark.
You can barely see what's going on, and it's hell. It goes from, this is what we're selling you, and then the reality is it's hell.
Right.
And it's war, and it's blood sport. And basically there's this awful, battle going on and on the field, and then we meet a character called Billy Cole, who is the star running back for the fictitious LA Stallions football team. And he gets a call from a character. We don't know who this is yet, but we'll later know it's an amazing character called Milo, played by Taylor Negron, who's on the phone. And he tells him, you need to run a certain amount of yards today, or you need to score a certain amount of touchdowns. And the implication being it's to do with gambling and spread betting, but we're not totally sure what's going on, but he's putting a lot of pressure on him. In the script, it's more overt that it's like he'll cut off his pill supply and he's on drugs and things like this, and they're manipulating him for gambling purposes, and he has to run a certain amount of yards and things like that. So and he's clearly pushing this guy to the brink, and Billy Cole goes onto the field, pulls out the gun and shoots 3 defensive tackles or whatever they are, and gets into the end zone, takes off his helmet, gets on one knee, says, "Ain't life a bitch," and then shoots himself in the head. That's the beginning of this movie.
So I wanted to I think this is in some ways the greatest scene Tony Scott has ever directed. I think it's astonishing.
Wow.
I just think it's so well made. And the reason I think it is so well made is because there's some things going on in this sequence that are almost exactly like Chinatown, but soaking wet, which when you think about water is so fascinating, because Chinatown's about who takes water, and this film opens with maybe the wettest sequence in all of movie history. But you have this setup where we sort of see a victim, Billy Cole, of this larger conspiracy. We sort of watch this play against the backdrop of this thing that Americans all love, but they're all miserable watching in this moment because they have their umbrellas out.
Yeah.
And on the edge of this, but really at the center, is Shelley Marconi, played by Noble Willingham, who is very similar to the John Huston character in Chinatown.
Noah Cross.
Noah Cross.
Yeah.
Very good pull. A rich, successful, sophisticated psychopath who only wants money and power. And
white suit and all, right?
White suit. Kind of, hey, I'm just an unassuming character. And he's pulling the strings, and the movie is setting up this much larger tragedy. And it's so LA because, I only moved here a few years ago. But I every time I drive past a water and power building, I kind of have this moment, because I love LA, but I associate it so much because of movies like this with power broker ideas and who's in charge, and there's something going on behind the surface in every interaction in LA. It's all about power. It's about who controls the water. It's about who controls power. And in this case, it's about who controls the greatest American national pastime.
The distraction for the masses, right?
Yeah, the opiate,
in a way,
right.
In
the
the way,
spectacle
this
of
is
football.
And speaking of great 70s movies, almost it's a sort of rollerball, for example. This is what we use to distract the masses while we're stealing from them.
Look, however you feel, you can love football or not like football, it doesn't really matter. But a lot of some people make a lot of money off of football on the fact that every Sunday people sit down and they watch 4 games of football, right?
Well, there's a few things I wanted to
You
say
love
about.
football.
I absolutely love football, and I want to talk about that for a second. But what I also wanted to say to your point about LA and how this is such a specifically LA story, I discovered a piece of interesting family history. And I'm from the north of England. Didn't think I had any kind of connections, but when you go down these rabbit holes of genealogy, like we're doing for the show, funnily enough, I discovered that I had an ancestor not too far distant who was called William Gawthorne, who worked on the viaduct. He was an Irish immigrant and worked on the viaduct here in Los Angeles during the Mulholland era. And it gave me this weird feeling of like, wow, I have some kind of connection to the foundations of the city in an odd way. And it made me feel like I was on the right track in life. But it's interesting that... there's this weird dichotomy with Los Angeles, and as you're saying, with the LA noir of it all, which is it's bright, it's beautiful, it's seductive, but it's built on a crime, right? It's built on violence and crime, and to some extent, almost kind of genocide because of what the stories around Mulholland and the flooding and all of this stuff is crazy. That's also an extension of the American story.
Well, the manifest destiny of westward expansion.
Exactly. So there's a lot of deep roots to noir and how it's a uniquely American genre.
Yeah.
You know,
and also I think you hit on something in the head, which is the history of America is the history of genocide and trauma, right? And that's true of many countries in the world, but
Britain's not exempt from that either. By the way, I'm not claiming any kind of moral authority.
Of course, and there's a cultural reckoning going on with these issues, and I think what I love about film noir is that in an often entertaining package, that shit is right there on the surface, right? Like it's just part of the thing, and I think the kind of paranoia and fear that is engendered in stories like this is so central, and the mass distraction of like, oh, look at this, look over here, don't look at the people building the stadiums taking cash bribes to make the process happen. Don't look at the football. Look at the football. And like, I'm not suggesting that these things aren't fun. Like, that's the craziness of entertainment, is that, you know, it's all about money on some level.
So what I think is interesting about this, and why I think it's worth just taking a moment to talk about LA noir, and this is also sort of neo-noir, where two things are often kind of the same thing. There was a lovely line in Larry Taylor's book about Tony Scott that called the world of this movie a casual dystopia. And I thought that was such a wonderful turn of phrase.
Tell me more.
Well, this is a world where politics are completely corrupt, as embodied by the senator Calvin Baynard, played by Chelsea Ross.
He's so good.
The police are inept.
Yeah.
The streets are lined with hitmen.
Yeah.
And there's no morality, essentially.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was a really great. That to me speaks to the noir, the mood of a noir, where essentially you can't trust the police, you can't trust government, you can't trust your senators, you can't trust the sort of structural institutions that are supposed to help the citizenship. You're basically on your own in a moral vacuum.
Especially when you consider that it's a response to World War II, where like traditional notions of a whole bunch of things in society collapsed under the weight of horrible violence, right, and genocide. So its worldview comes from the most extreme piece of history.
So, and what this film does, though, is take these traditions of noir and these traditions of serpentine detective stories, but they give it an adrenaline boost by making it this hip, violent, action-packed, foul-mouthed buddy action movie, right? And that's the interesting intersection of some of the elements that are at play with Last Boy Scout.
There's a lot of substance under the surface in this movie. That's not to say that the movie is superficial, but like that's the thing I love the most about this movie, beyond like it being just a banger of a movie to watch, is it's really aspiring for something that I'm not sure a lot of action movies are aspiring for. You know, a film like Die Hard, which is a great movie. Die Hard is about things. It's about, we've talked about how it's a little bit about class. It's about being an individual. It's about there's a little bit of distrust in that movie of authority that there is in this. There's a critique of it's about the excess of the.
I think it's a critique of sort of gung ho state power, right? At its worst excesses.
In the car.
In the car, and the FBI, the amoral FBI agents.
It's about the media. It's about a lot of different things. It's about the excess of the 80s. It's about all these sort of kind of issues and things.
And kind of an LA gold rush as well, with like the Nakatomi Corporation, and that clamoring for money and greed. And what's the price of that?
We make the joke about follow the 8-episode series about what happens to Nakatomi Co. after the film, but it's an interesting question, But in some way, as much as Die Hard is about those things, Die Hard is really about a man trapped in a building. Mm-hmm. And I think that Last Boy Scout has enough space in it for the themes to really emerge as part of the story. And partially because it takes the villain in the film is a corrupt team owner and a corrupt politician, right? It's really about the history of LA.
It's really about the powerful and the powerless. Like, you know,
Who holds power?
And our heroes have no power, you know, and the villains have all the power.
Yeah, but I want to critique that a little bit because this movie is about power dynamics, but it's also on an individual level who holds power in any given scene. And I think that relates really, really closely to Bruce Willis's relationship with his daughter in certain scenes of the movie. Bruce Willis's relationship with his wife. There are individual moments. The scene between the incompetent police officer and his like only maybe decent character in the movie, his underling. I think that this movie critiques power in a multitude of ways, especially about men in some ways. You know, you mentioned earlier that the movie might be misogynistic, but I think there's a lot to be gleaned from like Bruce Willis's relationship with his daughter, which I think is really, really interesting.
Well, I was sort of wanted to go back a little earlier and talk about what, you know, when we're introduced to, we have the scene with Billy Cole that's somewhat out of context. It's this grabber of a scene. We meet Joe Hallenbeck, who is a drunk, slobby private detective, and then he gets a phone call from his buddy Mike and about a job, and we're just like, he's just, you know, he's a kind of a deadbeat. Goes to his home, and then we meet his wife, and I think this is one of the best scenes of all time. When Joe Hallenbeck, played by Bruce Willis, goes home, and his wife Sarah is in her robe in the morning, and is a little skittish, and he's not supposed to be home.
They're
yet.
kind of arguing. He's supposed to be in
They've
Vegas.
clearly got a bad marriage, right? It's clearly
it seems great. Everything's going great.
It's clearly quite strange.
They don't trust each other.
You know.
She thinks he like went to Vegas to gamble.
gamble, and
But I love when he
know.
goes, "No, I was there on a skip trace."
Right.
And then he kind of pauses, and then he goes, $50
bucks. With a cigarette in his mouth. And then, you know, Bruce Willis is walking around the apartment, we
Notices
don't know
something.
what's going on really. And then he just says out of nowhere, very casually, "So who's the guy in the closet?" And what plays out is this amazing scene of, these are the things that I love to teach in screenwriting, or that I advocate for, which is have a scene do more than one thing. This is a scene that is suspense, tension. There's a narrative enigma. It's relational. We understand that it's doing so many things in such a short space of time. And basically, he says, you know, she denies. She's like, "What are you talking about?" And he says, "Oh, that's right. Sometimes you forget I'm a detective." And pieces together. Okay, there's steam in the shower, but your hair isn't wet. The toilet seat is up. There's no one under the bed. I'm guessing that when you heard my key hit the lock a day early, you stuffed him in the closet. So who is it? And we think maybe he is crazy, and she's saying you're crazy. She's kind of gaslighting him, right?
Yeah.
You know, like you should
fucking
call your
nuts,
shrink.
Joe.
Call your shrink, Joe. You're fucking. And of course, actually, he's completely
Right.
correct.
Mike's in the closet.
And old Bruce McGill sheepishly
Bruce McGill
comes out of the closet.
Bruce McGill's in a lot of good movies.
He is.
The Insider.
That's his best. I think that's his
amazing.
best. What you can have right or left.
He's in like two
So
scenes
good
in
in
that
that.
movie.
As a lawyer,
he's
yeah, he's
unbelievable in it.
fantastic.
We've jumped a little bit ahead to the hero, which is
Yeah.
Okay.
Kind of. But it was just, I just think that scene is worth spending a moment on, because it's just one. I think almost those are the kind of scenes that when they're in a script, these are why people buy scripts. Because
to read them, you mean?
Why people buy a
produce a
scene
script.
that good, that early, is like, this is an amazingly
How old
clever
was-
scene about a sort of stock situation that is reinvented.
How old was Shane Black when he sold the script?
He was I think he was a recent UCLA grad
my
when
God.
he sold Lethal Weapon. I think he was like 24.
Oh my God. At the end of that scene, Mike leaves the house and he starts his car and he explodes. Now, here's a question for you. How often when you're walking down the street, I'm really serious about this, do you walk past a car as it's starting and go, hope that car doesn't explode? Like, I think watching too many action movies growing up, every time I'm near a car that starts, I'm like, ooh, hope that car doesn't explode. It's a weird thing. Because this movie, how many cars explode in
I don't know. There's a lot. There's at least two. Must be more. There's multiple car
explosions, multiple being shot dead in front of your car, helicopters, stuff like that.
Vehicular mayhem.
We've talked about the premise, which is the first tenet of the anatomy of an action movie. Let's talk about the ticking clock, which is the second one, and it's kind of like the plot device that keeps the story moving. You know, action movies need forward momentum, and often there's an artificial MacGuffin. A bus can't drop below 50 miles per hour, or there's a bomb in a briefcase.
Yes. So this is an interesting. It plays with the ticking clock device in an interesting way. And the simple version of this is that the ticking clock really kicks in the third act. This Serpentine investigation has pulled in all of these different characters, and they're piecing together what is essentially a blackmail plot. The Halle Berry character, who is Jimmy Dick's, Damon Wayans' character, we haven't even got into those, but basically...
We're 47 minutes and we've barely said the name Damon Wayans.
Halle Berry's,
it's not you, it's us.
Halle Berry's character, Corey, who is Jimmy Dick's, the Damon Wayans character's girlfriend, is suddenly murdered. And that is the catalyst for the investigation, and we realize that she is trying to blackmail the character that you mentioned, Shelley Marcone, who's the owner of the LA Stallions.
Power and the powerless. Who's powerful?
Right.
She's powerless.
She's powerless.
He's powerful.
She's trying to use blackmail because she's unearthed a plot between an alliance between Marcone and this senator. They're trying to legalize sports gambling. We'll come to
and
understand.
Get kickbacks essentially.
And so that's kind of where the story is taken, and they're kind of piecing that together and trying to get the bad guys. What ends up happening with the ticking clock is it really kicks in the third act when Joe and Jimmy realize that a briefcase filled with explosives is heading to the LA Coliseum, and the bomb is going to kill Senator Boehner as well as countless innocent people at the stadium. One of the things that I think is so genius, though, about this premise and where the story goes can be defined in this one line of dialogue where Jimmy Dick says to Joe, I figure you got to be the dumbest guy in the world. You're trying to save the life of the guy who ruined your career and avenge the death of the guy who fucked your wife. I mean, that is Shane Black. Like,
well, that's also film noir.
You know,
it's like nihilistic.
But it's so great because it's like doing the right thing is the hardest thing to do. Now, Joe's daughter, Darian, played by Danielle Harris, has also been captured by the bad guys, so there is some personal stakes at play, and there are innocent people involved. But that was just such the sort of the irony of that is wonderful.
And what I think is important is that we've quoted this amazing line from the film, but now we should talk about our heroes and what is exactly going on. So this film,
we're jumping around a little bit.
Fine. Yeah. This film has two heroes: Joe Hallenbach, played by
Bruce Willis, the greatest Bruce Willis. One of his best performances, one of his best
maybe
characters.
His second greatest creation.
I would say certainly so. And actually, in some ways, I think this is a bit more of a stretch for him than McClane. I would say McClane, which he is obviously amazing in Die Hard, right? But I don't feel like it's, and there's some scenes in particular, like we talked about, like his speech with Al Powell on the phone when he thinks he's going to die, where there's real heavy lifting acting going on.
He's so good in that.
But I don't necessarily feel like it's as hard for him to do that character because I feel like it's quite connected to his own persona, and that's why it's transcendent. I feel what's interesting about this character is it feels like quite different, and it's almost like a Robert Mitchum type character.
Oh, interesting.
You know, it's almost some of this so grizzled and old, and he's not that old when he's playing. He's probably early 40s.
He's like
but
my
he
age.
acts as if he's like 60. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. He's a private detective in a film noir. He has to be an alcoholic. He's gonna give himself lung cancer. He smokes in every goddamn scene in this movie, except even at the end when he's got a polo shirt on.
Even when he's sorted
smoking.
out, he's still puffing away.
Yeah, he's really and there's shades of what will follow in Die Hard with a Vengeance in this performance, and that he's just given up, right? Yeah. And we should say he plays an ex-Secret Service agent who once saved the president of the United States from gunfire, but also slapped a senator who was beating up a woman in a hotel room, and that senator is Boehner, the man whose life he has to save, which is what Damon Wayans is explicitly referencing earlier in the film.
So I think this is significant because the Secret Service are the ultimate patriots. Their job is to defend the office of the presidency, not the occupant, right? They are democracy's last line of defense. And I've actually gotten to know a few people in that world recently. You know, their worldview is really extraordinary and almost just the sense of heroism that's casual to them, but to people like, you know, the regular Joes looking at them and what they're about. Regular Joes like me, you know, regular schmucks like me looking at these incredible people that heroism has sort of come naturally to them. And you couldn't get a more heroic profession in a way than someone who is an ex-Secret Service agent who are literally willing to take a bullet and die in defense of democracy, in defense of someone you may not even like, actually, because of what it means. And that's that's Joe Hallenbeck's backstory. So I think that's very significant. This is someone who was a hero, who but
fallen hero now,
doing the right thing, standing up and punching the senator who was sort of sexually abusing this woman in the hotel room, cost him everything. So
he stands up for what he believes in,
right?
Which, by the way, is a very American idea. I mean, it's an everywhere idea, but there's a lot of American values are defined by standing up for what you believe in. Yeah.
So that's Joe, and then we have Jimmy Dix.
Before we go further, Phil, I want to just disagree with one thing you said there. You said you're a regular schmuck. I actually think you're a pretty extraordinary schmuck.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Liam. I don't know if that's good or bad, but...
Well, considering the antagonism of the characters of this movie, I just feel like we should keep it going, fuckface.
Okay. All right. Fine,
Speaking
asshole.
of Jimmy Dix.
Yes, Jimmy Dix, played by...
Damon Wayans.
Who I think's great in this
film
movie.
debut?
Well, he had a memorable cameo in Beverly Hills Cop.
Oh, that's right.
As the take the banana guy.
Yeah, his performance in this film is controversial. I spoke with a few people who are like, "Oh, he's so grating in this movie," but it's a star turn.
I think he's great in it.
I'll tell you this: I think he's perfectly up to the sort of slightly obnoxious character that he has to play in
One
the
of
movie.
the things I think is interesting as well about Damon Wayans in this movie is, on paper, this is a totally obnoxious, unlikable character. We meet him within a few. So he's the superstar quarterback for the LA Stallions, 89-90, they say. So he had a 2-year run, had the best arm in the league. Was this sort of rising star. Then he got kicked out because of gambling charges or gambling allegations and allegations of drug abuse, and now he's sort of like peripherally hanging around the team.
Seems to have enough money to kind of like exist.
And he
pays Halle Berry's rent in the film.
And he has $650 pants, as we find out later.
Yeah, I would spend more on pants personally, but that's just me.
But it's interesting, he's a cokehead, right?
Yeah.
He's a drug addict. He cheats on his girlfriend. That's how we meet him, I think. He's like slept with his girlfriend is Halle Berry in 1991, and
he cheats on her
randomly.
and he like goes to the bar that she works at, and she doesn't know he cheats on her, right?
No,
of course
he's
not.
borderline alcoholic, and even says, "I nail anything with a heartbeat." And it's like on paper, this is a loathsome character, yet somehow Damon Wayans, to me, makes him sympathetic, and you actually like him.
Well, I think part of what this movie is about is these guys looking for redemption, like
totally.
a chance at coming back to their previous stature, right? And what's interesting is that actually at the end of the film, neither goes to do what they aspire to do necessarily. I mean, it's not like at the end of the film, Bruce Willis becomes a Secret Service agent again, or Damon Wayans becomes a star football player. They actually come together.
It's almost coming to peace with the circumstances that you're in,
right,
rather than chasing the past glory.
Well, they become essentially Hallenbeck and Dix, two private detectives, which, by the way, I would watch that TV show.
Absolutely. I've been trying to make it happen. And actually, when I was a kid, I had a handwritten treatment for Last Boy Scout 2.
Oh my God.
It's set up.
The very Last Boy Scout.
It's set up for the sequel. I want to see those two guys do a detective agency.
Absolutely. And, they have a classic antagonistic relationship. They don't like each other. By the end of the film, they are partners and have respect for one another. And that's sort of earned over the course of the film with some nice asides and moments where, like, there's a moment where Damon Wayans is, like, he's surveilling the senator's house, right? And he goes, "What would Joe do?" He'd shoot the guys and say, "Fuck you," or whatever it is.
Smoke
but like
some cigarettes.
You sort of see them start to become close and mirror each other. There's one scene, though, that I really want to point to. You mentioned earlier, like, this is about the power and the powerless. And I think one thing that Shane Black does that he doesn't shy away from is the hypocrisy in Hallenbeck's character. Because there's a scene where where Dix is in Hallenbeck's house. Mm-hmm. He spends some time with his daughter. He's kind of endeared himself to Hallenbeck in this moment. Dix goes in the bathroom, and Hallenbeck comes in, and Dix is doing cocaine. Mm-hmm. And Hallenbeck throws him out. And it leads to this sort of impassioned monologue from Dix about how, like, I got screwed by the NFL.
I think he's great in that scene as well.
Really, like, you get this real picture into how he feels in that moment. And Bruce Willis is still like, get the fuck out of here. Mm-hmm. And, like, in that moment, I hated Hallenbeck. I was like,
Interesting.
you're an alcoholic? Like, you can't keep your
Yeah.
life together? And you're
Right.
given, like...
Who are you to judge?
You're such a hypocrite, you know?
yeah.
And, like, you know, it might say something about the film and its period and its relationship towards drugs, but I'm sorry, like, you're, like, literally on your third tequila. Who are you to judge? Not
chain smoking.
Yeah,
you know,
it's like...
borderline alcoholic, if not straight out alcoholic.
Yeah.
But I guess it's the parental thing. I think that's what it's going. Is that there is a line drawn in concrete, right? You're not going to have cocaine around my 13-year-old daughter,
Right,
or whatever
right,
she
right,
is.
right.
You know, so yes, but there is a hypocrisy. I think. That's
And well, again,
true.
it comes. There's a scene before that where Bruce Willis is kind of arguing with Darian, his daughter. She's watching Lethal Weapon on
Yes.
the TV,
Yeah,
which is a great
super
sort of
meta.
super meta. A little too meta. It kind of
Yeah.
pulls you out. You go like, oh, it's like Lethal Weapon. Though I think Hallenbeck and Riggs have quite a bit in common, but. There's, again, that's a scene where I kind of look at it and I'm like, I don't know that we're supposed to be like, yeah, Willis is right. Like, he's an asshole to his daughter. Like,
They're not. They don't shy away from showing the flaws of both characters.
Well, and he's kind of a neutered figure. He has no power in his house because he's an asshole who's kind of disconnected from his life.
him.
Yeah.
His wife doesn't respect him.
And the movie's insistence upon, like, you have to respect me, I'm your dad, almost feels like self-aware. And it's like, why would anyone respect you?
Yeah.
You suck. But again, there's no heroes anymore. Like, this is a thematic idea
And
that
she
the movie
used
plays
to,
with.
and that's it, because he has the flashback where, oh, I love that moment where she's drawn the picture, and it's like, it's you, Daddy, and it's him standing in front of the American flag after he'd saved the president's life, and now she's drawing Satan claws.
And look, I don't know.
Everything has
Satan
fallen.
claws,
everything,
right.
you know, it's almost like biblical. And
Yo,
it's like
Satan
the
Claus is
damned
pretty cool,
world,
though.
You know? Fallen angels,
casual dystopia.
you know, yeah.
And look, I don't know if the movie is necessarily commenting on the idea of, like, his role as the father or the, as you pointed out, the misogyny in this movie. But, like, it's just hard. Maybe this is hindsight, but it's hard to, like, respect this character at times in the movie. And I don't ding the movie for that. I like that. I like an occasionally or often very unlikable protagonist. You know,
But Bruce Willis offsets it because he can play a character that's kind of an asshole. I mean, McClane is kind of an asshole, right? When we first meet, a little bit.
Yeah, but he's situationally so at a weakness that you kind of feel for him. You kind of want. But yes, he's shitty to his.
Not every act. In both cases, I think it says a lot. These are two potentially unlikable characters that are empathetic because of the actors who play them.
And they rise to the occasion and the challenge.
Yeah, and it's, as you say, it's a redemption story. And the other thing I think that's important about their relationship that's worth noting, a la Lethal Weapon, is that although there's a generational, attitudinal, and economic difference between these two guys, the racial difference is never commented upon and is never a factor, and it's totally irrelevant to their relationship as it should be. And I think that's that's cool at a time where because a lot of the politics of this film, especially with the sexual politics, have not aged well at all. But I think that's something that I think is cool about both this and Lethal Weapon. Well, it's irrelevant.
There feels as though there's a casual. Well, Lethal Weapon is interesting because I think in the second and third Lethal Weapons obviously deal with race in a much more candid way, which I think is great. I think that's actually one of my favorite things about particularly Lethal Weapon 3 is that it acknowledges LA at the time and the violence that was going on and, like, doesn't shy away from it. And it's, you know, if this movie got 3 sequels, maybe there would be a different take on it. But yeah, there's no, like, it feels as though their relationship is just rooted in their kind of, like, odd couple antagonisms.
Yeah.
You know,
you don't even think
Dix
about it.
Dix is flashy.
You know?
He's arrogant. He's kind of obnoxious. He's petulant. He's a little brother. Hallenbeck is kind of like, I wouldn't say he's arrogant. He's hypocritical, but he's also, like, street smart. Mm-hmm. He's a bit of a bruiser. He can read a situation. Again, Bruce Willis plays the best detectives. Yeah. He's such a smart, and he's the guy you always underestimate.
And everyone underestimates him in this film.
He's the king of underestimation.
He uses that to his advantage in situations like the scene where the guy's going to kill him in the alley, and he acts as if he's really drunk, and he makes him laugh by telling these your wife is so fat jokes. He literally uses the fact that everyone thinks he's just a bum and a deadbeat to his advantage and to gain the upper hand at times.
Yes. And also the scene where he has Darian's bear and he blows away 4 guys doing the silly groundhog voice or whatever that is.
Furry Tom.
Very quickly, nobody drinks whiskey like Bruce Willis drinks whiskey. Also, he just has this. You're kind of like, "Yep, that's how this guy." He just puts it down. He's like, "Let's go again."
You totally. But there's not a false note, I think, in his performance. I love this character.
Yeah, I mean, it really is amazing. Bruce Willis.
He playing characters that have had the shit kicked out of them by life.
Yeah.
Bruce Willis is amazing at that.
Well, there's a lot of moments where he gets punched and he's like, you
Oh, he
hit me
takes
again and
so
I'll
much
kill
punishment.
you. And then he takes another punch.
Yeah.
And like, he kind of, there's that scene in the pool when the two sort of shitty late 80s, early 90s henchmen are like holding him down and he hits one hits him and he's like, do it again. And then he does it again and he breaks the guy's neck. It's brutal. It's a gross movie.
Should we, while we're on that, should we talk about the villains?
Hey, let's talk about the villains. Let's talk about your first one last.
Okay.
If you don't mind.
Yeah.
You're like, what have you done? So I want to start with the three sidekicks here. Mr. Scrabble.
Okay.
Which one is Mr. Scrabble?
So Mr. Scrabble is the apprised Roger Dangerfield of the situation here, and the guy who's like, he says, perhaps we can dispense with the fun and games now, yes? He's played by an actor called Jack Keller, who
Right.
or Kerler, I don't know how you say his name, it's Kehler. Lovely actor who is memorable for his little part in Big Lebowski as the landlord for the dude.
Yeah,
And he's
of
like
course.
doing bad
Yeah.
LA theater and stuff,
Yeah.
but he's really like sweet.
Talk about a good LA noir. That is
Sure,
an
yeah, yeah,
amazing
it's a
LA
great
noir.
example.
Totally.
Does something really interesting with it. So there's him. There's Chet, who you were just talking
Whose
about,
nose
played
gets
by
broken.
the great Kim Coates.
When else is Kim
Bamba,
Coates?
baby. See, I love a maniacal laugh.
You do.
I love a henchman doing maniacal laughter.
When Phil, for Phil, heaven will be flying around in a helicopter and doing maniacal
yes,
laughter.
it really would.
Yeah,
it
that's,
really
that's
would.
what it's
You
gonna
know me
be.
so well.
I do. This is Valhalla. What other films is Kim Coates in?
One of the ones that he's done so much work. He had a great part in Entourage as a suicidal, coked up producer who was
Wow.
down on his luck. One of the movies I remember him from really well was Black Hawk Down,
Oh, good movie.
which is
Scott
also,
Brother. Yeah.
also kind of a Die Hard type scenario. Actually, in
that movie is. I saw that the weekend
A
it
great
opened,
movie.
and I was like, I was completely devastated by it. It couldn't
So
blew my mind.
he's been in tons and tons of things, and then Pablo, played by Frank Collison, as well as the other guy in that scene in the pool house,
Who's kind of
So,
just a shit-eating grin on his face. I just want to slap him in the
Yeah.
face.
really irritating.
Then we have
in a good way.
we have Milo.
Milo,
Philip,
you're just throwing that away. We have Milo. Like, roll
Philip,
out the fucking red carpet.
Philip, you disappoint me. Let's talk about Milo.
Right? Has
Are
everyone
you a
got-
Milo guy?
Okay, here's what I'll say. Milo is the greatest henchman in the history of cinema. Boom.
Oh no.
Oh yeah.
You think so?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Now don't get me wrong.
Mr. Joshua.
Mr. Joshua's in the Hall of Fame, right?
Or
No,
Carl.
He's in the Henchman
I'm sorry,
Hall of
Carl
Fame. They're all
and
in the
Joshua?
Henchman. They're all in the Henchman Hall
Way
of Fame.
above this guy.
Carl, Joshua, no. For me, it's Milo all day. Like they don't
Coming
have,
soon, Milo all day, a
They
podcast.
don't have the lines that
I see.
Milo
Okay,
has.
yeah.
Okay, like Gary Busey, it's pure just like actor charisma and ferocity for both of those guys. And you made a wonderful case for good enough and why he's so amazing in Die
Yeah.
Hard, and he absolutely is. But we don't really know.
Well,
much
he's the
about his
strong
character.
silent type,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. That's what the actor brings to the
And
role.
Busey brings
Okay.
this like discipline,
What
but
do we
this
know about
maniacal.
Joshua?
Yeah.
Nothing. It's just pure Busey's ferocity that makes
Right.
that character interesting.
Goddamn Christmas!
You know, and the scene with the lighter, but you don't know anything about that. I couldn't really say one line that he says.
It's goddamn Christmas after he shoots the TV. It's one of the funniest moments in that movie.
I-
But he's unhinged. But it's basically his personality character is to be disciplined and then unhinged.
Milo has like so much going for him, right? Like talk about he doesn't even enter the movie apart from that phone call until like
45
an hour in.
now, yeah.
You know?
I actually think that's a deficit in the movie. I wish he came in earlier.
Yeah, because he's absolutely amazing.
Well, and I want more. I think one of my issues is there's not enough antagonism between him and Hallenbeck.
Every scene that they're in is just so electric, and you know what an introduction for a character, right? So the door, it was sort of halfway through the story, and suddenly the door opens, and Joe Hallenbeck is like shot with a taser in the chest, and morning, Joseph.
Yeah.
And then
He's a psycho. Big Hannibal Lecter vibes sometimes from this guy.
he's so amazing. He's also very stylish. Pulls off red pants, which is pretty hard.
I'm
to
wearing
do.
orange
You're
pants.
doing it today. It's very JFK. that.
Milo inspired.
But you know he's very stylish and he's just his line delivery is amazing. And what I think's so cool about that is Taylor Negron, the actor playing Milo, was a stand-up comic. And I think that, stand-ups, if they're really good, are mastered their cadence to the point that they can make you laugh even when they're not saying something funny.
Yes.
Right? So I think that elevates
Ooh.
this character.
Well
you know?
said.
So it's just that they're so in command of their linguistic skills and their intonation that they can but fortunately not. So you have an actor that has incredible dialogue. He's visually really interesting. His way, and also his sort of casuality, where it's like, take Chet's corpse out of here and fix Hallenbeck a drink. Fix Mr. Hallenbeck a drink. He's at times he's quite chill.
He's a psychopath. He's a sociopath. Sociopathic. No, you're absolutely right.
So I think Milo is the top henchman ever for me.
Well, speaking of top, the reason that I wanted to go in the order that we did is I wanted this to reflect what I think is interesting about the noir power structure of this movie, which is the bad guy is always the rich guy, right? The in a noir especially. But we get finally to Shelley Marcone, played by Noble Willingham.
Mm-hmm.
And what I love about this guy is actually in some ways my favorite part of the movie. I'm not as crazy about Milo as you. I like him, but I think that if I have a critique of this movie that I love, it's that I wish it leaned into its film noirness like a little bit. I think there's again, none of this is said like I don't enjoy the movie or I don't like the movie or I don't think the movie is astonishingly well made or whatever. Phil's so angry. He's turning red. He's so mad at me. But I think that the movie is this interesting, and maybe this is what makes it work for you, and this is great. It's this weird dichotomy between an LA film noir and just a nasty, violent action movie.
Yeah.
And I think it works really, really well. But sometimes I wanted more of the grand conspiracy, and I wanted a little bit more of the kind of power structure, who's pulling the strings in this movie.
Well, it's interesting that the conspiracy in this movie is so clever and so believable that it's actually happened in real life. Gambling is now legal.
Yeah.
Right, in sports, which was only Nevada and Atlantic City, I would imagine, right?
Yeah.
It's funny because in the UK, gambling is it's so embroidered into our lives. It's constant. I mean, I've seen it creep up, right?
Yeah.
Like when I was a kid, there's literally in the UK, there's bookmakers everywhere as just like chain stores, right? You go
I think a lot of the world
take a flutter on the horses or
but that
whatever.
might suggest something about American puritanical thinking or values. A little bit.
But in the last few years in the UK, I've noticed now on the TV, it's basically every time you turn on the TV, the commercials are gamble, gamble, gamble. Why haven't you gambled? Every Premier League football team is sponsored. Tons of them are sponsored by international gambling companies, and now here in America in the NFL. And I love.
Do you gamble?
I don't,
okay.
and partly perhaps because I am weirdly puritanical about the game of football. As in the NFL.
Yeah.
In that I love the sport so much that I don't want to.
You don't pollute it.
I don't want to taint it. I'm not here preaching about gambling. I'm just saying for me personally, I don't. Also, I have enough stress and tension in my life without worrying if the Cowboys lose by 3 points, I'm going to lose $200. I don't need that kind of stress. I genuinely love the game, but this film hates football. To some extent,
and as well
regards it as
well said,
a blood,
and as
a dystopic blood
as well
sport.
as it should. I think that is a great perspective on the sport from what this movie is trying to do. Also, it's fair to say that, not to pull punches, because I think maybe the people who made this movie also hate football, but film noir hates most things. Yeah. Film noir is built upon.
Well, there's nothing pure,
right?
In the world of noir, right?
Occasionally,
really,
you'll have something pure, but it's. I mean, Chinatown is ruined. I mean, China. I don't want to spoilers for a 50-year-old movie, but the sort of thing that you think might be pure in Chinatown ends up being the most perverse, disgusting thing. The reason I want to talk about Shelley Marcone last again is that he's not a bruiser. He sits and he schemes and he drinks a whiskey and he's like a chubby dude who has all the power and is ferocious when he has to be, when he shoots Dix in the hands and shoots him in, like and Dix is a quarterback, so it's significant. And I like, this is true with Gruber and Carl, this is true with Mr. Joshua and his superior in Lethal Weapon, I forget his name, but Shelley Marcone is the ultimate. I'm just going to sit back and relax. Like, Shelley Marcone doesn't have to go look for the detonators.
Right.
Shelley Marcone gets to sit and print money and be the biggest piece of shit and, has everybody doing his bidding because they want what he already has. And that is like, in terms of the annals of like crappy, rich criminals in America, that guy is like the personification. And in some ways, he's like my favorite villain of any of these movies. Because to your point about how gambling is legal, this guy exists. There are people like this.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I just love how one of my favorite things is that he just runs away with the money. He thinks it's the money. It's the bomb. And his house blows up in the
It's
Hollywood
really
Hills.
interesting. That moment's really interesting because I think it's what $6 million. I think is the amount of money, right? This guy owns a football team, and at one point he thought this money was destroyed, but he's still so
Upset.
greedy that $6 million, which is like nothing to if you're talking about a multi-billion-dollar industry.
That's a really good point.
right?
It's like the
But
$1 million
can't-
in
can't-
Dr. Evil.
I mean, look, not many people would be willing to just leave $6 million on the table, but it's wonderful dramatic irony that his
He gets killed over
his petty
pittance.
greed
To
him
him.
undoes him. You know,
Right.
because that's probably like that's barely a salary for one of these players.
Yeah.
Right? It's really not that significant for the economics of professional football, even in 1991. You know,
Yeah, it's such a good point. And like, it makes you think about like Daniel Plainview and There Will Be Blood.
Yes.
Another great movie about corruption and like the soul of LA being corrupt, the intersection of business and religion. Like, he's in a rich tradition of insane rich assholes.
and you don't see football owners as villains like that was
That's a
original.
good point.
That's often they are, like Noah Cross is like a water magnate or whatever he is, or like property or politicians or businessmen. This is a unique character within the noir tradition.
Cultured people, everyone should go back and watch Chinatown. It's just this largesse. It's this way of living. It's this unencumbered, I don't give a shit about anybody.
There is such a rarefied atmosphere above the hoi polloi in their minds.
Yes, and
right? They can just be as venal and awful
and when
as
this
they
guy
want.
blows up, Damon Wayans and Bruce Willis laugh maniacally. And this movie has maybe similar to McClane. There's some class antagonism going on in this movie. There's an awareness. Hallenbeck is a work-a-day private detective. He has a job that literally basically doesn't exist anymore in that form. And Dix is like an out on his luck quarterback, right? Like they're kind of regular schmucks, and they're going up against a system that is massive and has shitty little dudes like Chet, Pablo, and Mr. Scrabble all the way up to some multi-billionaire. It's wild.
And at the higher level, people like Milo. Should we just talk about the senator, Calvin Baynard, briefly? Because
Of
he's
course.
the key antagonist.
Right.
He's quite an interesting
He's not in the film
character.
very much, but he's got a few scenes. It's sort of interesting again, these like men of great power. There's a scene where he's being interviewed and he's got the smile. And I think there's a really, really great choice in that scene. A really great choice, which is they finish shooting whatever and the PA or whoever who's helping shoot this commercial goes like, "Oh, thank you so much." And he turns and goes, "Oh, yes, thank you." He's not shitty.
I caught that too.
He's
I
not
thought it was a
antagonistic.
brilliant nuance.
He's like, "Yeah, you're welcome." Like
that's how a politician would
he
be.
plays
because,
it makes you like him, and then you realize he's the worst one in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, his true nature is ultimately exposed. But I did agree. I thought that he, the actor doesn't have a ton of space to dimensionalize that.
But he does
character.
so much
He
with them. A great actor.
He's great. Chelsea Ross.
Chelsea Ross. What else is Chelsea Ross in?
I know him well from my favorite sports movie of all time, Hoosiers, which is called Best Shot in the UK.
Hoosiers is a great movie.
I thought I was crying earlier about Tony Scott. He's also in Major League, I believe.
He is in
been
Major
in a bunch
League.
of sports movies.
Yeah, he just has the face of a late 80s shithouse, and he does it really well. Great actor.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this movie comes alive for me in the power dynamics, and so the villains are one of my favorite things about the entire movie. But you know what else is pretty good in this movie?
The action.
The action.
What I wanted to say about the action, this isn't the most bombastic of certainly until the big finale. A lot of the action in this is relatively grounded.
Yeah.
Right? Now,
little shootouts.
There's sort of flurries of violence. There's the Corey's death, which is really, really nasty. Where she's sort of gunned down gangland
We haven't
style.
talked much about Halle Berry. She makes a very strong impression in a short amount of time.
Amazing.
In this movie.
Leaps off the screen like so. She's so beautiful, obviously, but she's just got a grace and she seems so above that world.
She's a movie star.
Yeah,
You know?
instant movie star.
Yeah, incredible.
You know,
And Chelsea Field, we haven't
so
talked
likable.
about.
I've got quite a lot to say about Chelsea Field later.
You have quite a lot to say about an aspect of Last Boy Scout? Stop.
I know, hard to believe. So you also have the C4 explosion in the trunk of the car and the shootout in the woods with Furry Tom and then the freeway chase. And that action escalates. But so the action, I wouldn't say there's anything like, the action is really solid and really sturdy and muscular.
Workman-like.
But there isn't necessarily, until the ending where there's some the clever set pieces with throwing the ball to intercept the sniper's bullet and things like that.
That is so well shot.
Very
the way the ball
elaborate
hits,
choreography.
the gun goes off, and the ball explodes.
It's brilliant.
I watched it 3 times. I just kept rewinding it.
Brilliant craftsmanship. But they're mainly sudden bursts of violence. But there's an interesting thing that this film adheres to. I don't know. Have you ever come across the term the whammo chart?
No, but I
this?
think I'm about to hear about it.
You are.
Give it to me, Phil.
All right. So this is a rule that Joel Silver didn't create but adopted, which basically posits that every movie should have a burst of action every 10 to 12 minutes.
Oh, I've heard it, but never
Right.
called the whammo
Yeah,
chart.
that's one of the terms for, or sometimes called the 10-minute rule or the 12-minute rule. It needs an action beat every 10 to 12
It's like
minutes.
our impression chart. Every 5 to 6 minutes, we have to do an impression from an 80s action movie.
By contractual law. Hey, my impressions are
So every
terrible.
10 to 12 minutes, there's an action. And this movie adheres to
basically.
that.
So and the last one we did as well, Ricochet, is similar in the sense the action isn't necessarily hugely memorable or like trailer moments per se, like really like, oh, I haven't seen that image before. It's just, it's more sort of common or garden scenarios, an explosion, a shootout, a chase, what have you, but it's beautifully shot and it's really cool. But the reason I love this movie isn't because of the action, even though the action is very strong.
Yeah. No, I think this movie is all the ambiance and the feeling and the vibes and just being in the milieu of it, right?
Yeah, and the next point that I was going to make was largely why I love this movie is the humor, And this film, one of the points I wanted to make about it is, even though this film is is pretty hilarious, it's not an action comedy.
It's not a ha-ha movie.
It's not a comedy and it's not an action comedy, even though it's a buddy cop movie. In the same way, Lethal Weapon is also very funny, but it's not an action comedy. In my opinion, how I would designate that is like Rush Hour is an action comedy. Or,
I like Rush Hour.
Ride Along is an action comedy, but it's more the emphasis is more on the comedy than it is on here, as you mentioned very articulately in another one of the shows where you were talking about how the comedy is natural to the situation.
It's a human comedy,
right? It's organic, like
right.
to
Well
the
said.
moment, to the characters. It isn't the sort of Kevin Hart winking at the camera, somebody that's like a comedy star plugged into an action scenario, doing an extension of their shtick, essentially, right?
Right.
Like Chris Tucker,
The humor sticks in your mouth in this movie. Sometimes the things that are funny are also the most painful.
By the way, no disrespect to either of those guys or anything. I'm just making the point about the Dylan.
Well, this isn't a broad comedy. This is it's an action movie that is funny
It's just a different thing.
Yeah,
It's just not saying
absolutely.
one is better than
And I
the
would
other.
say that in some ways, like, you don't get as many of these anymore as you once did.
Films that are genuinely funny and they're R-rated, nasty, violence, kind of in a weird way serious movies that are also hilarious.
Right.
And they walk that line brilliantly. There's so many funny moments in. I mean, we're spoiled for choice, and so there's the leather pants discussion, the bomb moment. That bit is hilarious. Where they're trying to write the paper.
I forgot to tell you, bomb means fuck you in Polish.
Which apparently it doesn't. Because
Nah,
I asked my Polish friend, and he said that's
was
bullshit.
was your pal Jesse Ventura from Ricochet?
Kowalski.
Anyway.
That whole bit where it's like, he's trying to draw the picture of the bomb and he's like, it doesn't look like a bomb, it looks like an apple with lines coming out of it. He's going to say, don't open the briefcase, it's full of fresh fruit.
That's one of those weird moments where you're like, is he really dumb? Like, yeah. Another thing
But that's kind of believable, I think, for sports stars. Often aren't, they're if you're on that track early in life, you don't necessarily have the same educational acumen. It's certainly true of Premier League football players, soccer players. They're often, it's almost not their fault in a way, because they're just this is your sole focus.
Yeah,
now,
no, that's an interesting
point. If you're
point.
a sports star.
No, that's a good point. Another thing this movie does with the humor that relates to Die Hard is there's a lot of like, oh, you're the bad guy, huh? And oh, you go, find the nearest bad guy. Like, there's a meta quality. Again, one thing that that smart screenwriters do with Bruce Willis is they set him up in opposition to Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger. So in Die Hard, there's the like enough C4 to orbit
Right.
Arnold Schwarzenegger line. Like I like that they do that because Bruce Willis is much more of like a non-superhero. He's a regular guy. And I think the movie does some nice little bits with that or whatever the case. It's just smart about how it, Joel Silver's, there's a meta quality to Joel Silver's work. The ECU or the Extended Cinematic Universe that you mentioned from Ricochet last time, or the fact that, it's winky and maybe a little silly, but like the fact that Darian is watching Lethal Weapon in this movie. Like there's an acknowledgement of action movies in Joel Silver's
There's
movies.
another weird one that I meant to bring up when we did our Die Hard 2 episode, but there's a little Easter egg in that where, how Bonnie Bedelia is on the plane and there's like there's the granny next to her who has the taser.
Chekhov's taser,
Yeah, she's flipping through a magazine and the magazine falls on an advert for Lethal Weapon 2.
Should we put on the tuxes?
Let's do it.
You know what? I'd like to rename the awards today to the last Boy Scout Oscars.
Let's
Today.
do
Let's
it.
do it. So
Out of
let's-
respect.
Let me just put on my football jersey that I never got.
Wouldn't it be? I would love to get a Jimmy Dick's LA Stallions jersey.
You absolutely need to get
I
a
need
Jimmy
that.
Dick. And
Someone
I
can
need
hook
to
me
get a beard going that I need to get some Bruce Willis scruff. That's what I need to get.
You're working on. I'd say you're pretty close.
Yeah, I'm getting there. I dress too well, unfortunately. I'm just too stylish. Should we? Let's do it. So the Die Hard Last Boy Scout Oscars, aka the Action Movie Awards.
Yes. So
Tuxedos?
our first category is the John McClane Yippee-Ki-Yay Award for Best
Oh
Quip.
God, are there 45?
Exactly. Which ones haven't we said? Okay. All right. All right. I'm just trying to break the ice. I like ice. Leave it the fuck alone.
That's good.
We're being beat up by the inventors of Scrabble.
that is an amazing. I wrote that down.
That's a
I
hell
wrote
of
that
a
one
zinger.
down. Yeah, that's really good.
Can I just do my favorite?
Yeah.
Can I do my favorite? All right.
Oh.
Yes, officer. As a matter of fact, there is a problem. Apparently, there are too many bullets in this gun. Milo forever.
That's a good
that
one.
Is the
That's a
best
good one.
fucking line in action movie history.
That's a great line.
And the best delivery of it.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying about his
He's so
stand-up
casual.
comedian. Apparently, he puts the emphasis on apparently. So it seems so casual.
That's
and then
good.
all of a sudden just shoots the cop in the head. And I'm like, this character is incredible.
That
And
is
Taylor
really
Negron
good.
passed away a few years ago, and I
Oh.
just want to give him like a little bit of love as well, because I mean a lot of people love this. This is not me doing anything innovative, but I really do. He's done a bunch of great stuff. He has a great part in Friends as like a restaurateur.
Oh, that's right. He does.
Who he says he's Lebanese, and I think he runs an Italian restaurant, and they call him out for it, and then he hires Monica, and he's just so funny.
Yeah.
He's so funny, and he's amazing in this. And when he wants to be vicious, like when he's pistol whipping Joe,
Yeah.
like, and he says, "Touch me again, and I'll kill you," and he does it anyway after he's already killed Chet. You're just like, man, this guy is so interesting.
Yeah.
He's so interesting. So
The one
love
other
him.
quip that I want to bring up that I think is good is when Dick says Danger's my middle name and Helen Beck says mine is Clarence.
Cornelius.
Cornelius, that's what it is. That's right. That's very, very good. I think the winner is it has to be that there's too many bullets in this
I think it's
gun.
one of the best lines in action movie.
It's
history
really
for-
good.
for real.
The Hans Gruber Exceptional Thief Award for stealing the film.
All right, so we
Who are our
we
nominees?
touched on that earlier. My nominees would be Chelsea Field as Sarah, who I think does a lot with like a totally thankless pop.
Yeah.
You know, a pretty sort of ugly portrayal of a the cheating wife. Like again, speaking to the rampant misogyny in
Yeah.
the movie, but I think she is really great with
I
a
think she's
character
empathetic.
you can't you don't dislike her when you kind of maybe should based on her actions.
But also
arguably.
you understand
But he's
because
clearly
he sucks.
a piece of garbage.
Yeah.
And being married to him must be a fucking nightmare.
Can't even imagine.
So, if you're sleeping with old Bruce McGill, you're sort of like weirdly
she's okay, Chelsea Field. I think that's a good pick.
I put her in there. I put Halle Berry as well.
I really hate the scene in the movie where he says "fuck you, Sarah." Like at the end,
I do too.
It's like really,
it doesn't it works intellectually as a clever play
Yeah.
on a subversion of the sort
of the romantic
reconciliation.
reconciliation.
But it's ugly to watch.
It's ugly to watch.
It's
the first
mean.
time I watched it, I was like, I really struggle with this.
It is the one bit where I'm like, I don't really like that. Also, I don't know, because Chelsea Field is so like appealing.
She's amazing in
You
this.
know,
movie.
she's
a
great.
great actress. And
I really,
strong.
big fan of hers.
But I think again, you mentioned this with Ricochet. the casting in these movies of the women, the material may be beneath them in some sense, but they always
They
cast
elevate it.
well, and
They elevate it,
they
yeah.
always make the character more empathetic, and they make them feel as though they have agency. And I think that's
Interestingly, just the original script, the Shane Black script, Sarah had a sort of bigger role, the Chelsea Field character, and ends up actually killing Milo at the end.
Oh, I like that.
But what they did with it was
They reshot the ending of this movie, right?
well, Bruce Willis, and I get where he was coming from, was like the original story is about Milo was actually, his backstory was like he directs snuff films. And that's how you meet him. And he's got a chainsaw. It's it's really, really ugly stuff. And Sarah is going to be in one of these snuff films at the end. And it's a race against time to get her. It's really, really extreme. And Bruce Willis was like, look, I've just done two Die Hard movies where it's all about me saving my wife. I don't want that to be my motivation again.
Is he a producer on this movie? He's not.
No, he's not. But Shane
but,
Black is an EP, actually.
but maybe a producer in
Because
the stories from this set is that there's a lot of challenging behavior between Scott, Willis,
Silver, Willis.
I mean, it's
and
kind of
Black.
an alpha male.
Yeah, totally.
And I know Wayans and Willis did not like each other.
Apparently,
who knows? Who knows?
Wayans since walked that back.
Oh,
but yeah. So I have the other.
Halle Berry.
I have Halle Berry, who, as you say, I think is
exceptional,
magnetic.
Yeah,
and just so good in her. But it's such a shame she kind of dies so quickly in the film.
But God, Halle Berry has the last laugh because she's made a relevant and amazing movie star ever since.
And an Academy Award winner, and just,
amazing
just a
actress.
truly great actor.
She's truly good. I think Halle Berry takes it. I want to mention Clarence Fielder, who plays the underling to the main incompetent police detective in this film.
Is he the one that Milo kills?
Yes, the one that Milo kills. I just think that guy has heart, and I like when he shakes
nice
Bruce
scene.
Willis's hand. If we're talking about this movie being about there being no heroes, he kind of recognizes that's a big moment. He kind of goes I just want to shake your hand.
It is. It kind of hits that moment because there isn't much sentimentality at all in this film,
right?
And as you say, with that moment with the "fuck you, Sarah" speech, they try and subvert sentimentality at every turn.
But there's a sentimental moment between them.
But that is a lovely human moment where it's actually there are maybe still a few people around who respect the idea of heroism in these older values.
Yeah.
But for me, it is Taylor Negron as Milo. I have to say, that he absolutely steals the film.
Couldn't he take the next one?
It's the Dick Thornburg Award for Dick of the Movie. And our nominees are, for me, my nominees were Mike Matthews, played by Bruce McGill. Who
Pour one
sleeps
out for
with,
Bruce McGill.
Yeah.
Great actor.
Ali Thug, as he's credited, played by Bajar Jola.
The guy who your wife's so fat guy.
Yeah. I think he pops.
Memorable,
he's really,
definitely,
really fun.
definitely.
And Chet, played by Kim Coates, the henchman who Bruce Willis kills by slamming his hand into his nose. And
I think we got to give it to Ali Thug. What's the actor's name?
Bajar Jola, if I'm saying it correctly.
Yeah,
I apologize if I'm not.
Bruce McGill is a little. It's like Bruce McGill. Bruce McGill's good. Kim Coates just makes me. Chet makes me angry. I hate him so much. But wait, you know what? Actually, this is the dick of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's Chet. I take it back. It's Chet. Yeah, I was sort of thinking against stealing.
He really is a dick because it's such a sort of dick thing to do when he's he punches him. Sort of powerless. It's so petty.
Yeah.
And such it's a
best
good
death. I think we know what this is.
Presented by Marco.
No more table. Next time you have the chance to kill someone, don't hesitate.
All right. Okay.
Sorry, I can't not do
No,
it.
I give you the space. When
Thank
I
you.
say Marco, I step back.
This is my therapy.
Yeah.
Theraphil.
Doesn't it feel good?
Yeah, it does.
Doesn't it feel good? That's
does.
why I do it.
Yeah.
All right. My nominees are Chet being killed by a single punch, Marcone being...
That's brutal.
It's horrible,
Ooh.
isn't it? It's really nasty. Marcone being blown up by his own bomb.
In
as
his
we mentioned earlier.
Hollywood Foothills house.
And Milo landing on the helicopter rotor blades.
Yeah, it's Milo landing on the
Yeah,
helicopter
that's my
rotor
pick
blades.
too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Side note, as we mentioned in the Ricochet episode, I think every single film that we've covered so far features a helicopter at some point, as seemingly was a Joel Silver
even Hunt for Red October
mandate.
does.
Every single one. Up until possibly our next one. But again, this film ends in a high tower situation above Los Angeles with a helicopter at play and the main antagonist falling to their death, a la Die Hard. So all roads lead back. All right, double Jeopardy quiz trivia. You're going to love
the scores
this.
can really change. You're going to
this.
love this.
All right. Number one. Which heavyweight actor, known mostly for playing an iconic gangster on television, makes an uncredited appearance in this film as one of Shelley Marcone's goons?
It's not James Gandolfini, is it?
It is.
James Gandolfini is in this movie?
He is.
Where?
So he has a non-speaking role as one of the heavies. You can see him briefly in the scene where Jimmy Dix is thrown off the bridge.
Okay.
And you can also see him in the scene in the woods. But he has a heavy sort of beard and
Wow.
stubble, and he's wearing sunglasses. But if you can totally see it, and it makes sense because he was in 3 subsequent Tony Scott films: True Romance, Crimson Tide, and Taken a Pelham
He
1,
is
2, 3.
So goddamn good in all of those movies.
Absolutely.
Oh man, he is. What a great.
This is what I'm saying about the Scott brothers, and how they would.
I get a little
find-
emotional about
Yeah.
James Gandolfini.
Oh, I know another. Yeah, for sure. What an amazingly gifted.
Big part of the
actor and
pandemic for me was the
artist.
Sopranos rewatch. Did you wobble, my little red? And he's so good. He's so good in Crimson Tide. He's amazing in Crimson Tide.
Yeah.
I mean, he's good in everything. Don't get me wrong, but that shit-eating grin on his face when they're all pointing guns at each other and he's into it in Crimson Tide, you're like, this guy sucks. And
he's brilliant.
obviously, True Romance, unbelievable.
So interesting. Yeah, fun fact. Question number 2. Halle Berry was not Tony Scott's first choice to play the role of Corey. Can you guess which former Bond villainess he wanted to play Jimmy's girlfriend? And there is a clue available. If you
Clue
want to phone a
available. I
friend.
think I know who it is, but I don't want the clue.
She used to date Dolph Lundgren and appeared.
Oh, it's Grace Jones.
Yeah, and appeared in A View to a Kill.
So
as
I was
Mayday.
going to ask you, is it the woman from A View to a Kill? But yeah, wow, Grace Jones, amazing talent.
So that's interesting. That idea was nixed by the
What a
producers in the
cool! It
studio.
might have been distracting. She's so famous and so iconic. It might have been distracting.
Halle Berry is perfect
Yeah,
at
she
this
is
point in
perfect.
his career. And speaking of Halle Berry, this is question number 3. Before moving into the movies and becoming an Oscar-winning actress, one of Halle Berry's first roles was on the CBS soap opera Knots Landing. Which die-hard terrorist also became a regular on that soap?
It's not Carl, is it?
It's not. Do you want a clue?
Yeah,
He's probably your favorite terrorist.
Marco.
Yeah. Marco was on Knots Landing. So, all right. So, listen to this. So the actor's name was Lorenzo Caccialanza. He appeared in 30 episodes of Knots Landing between 1990 and 1993. And he was also a former professional goalkeeper and dated Jane Fonda for 6
Oh,
months
what
in
an
1989.
icon this guy is!
Yeah, so your boy Marco
cast?
is like... Halle Berry was on the show for 6 episodes in 1991. So, yeah,
Wow,
there you go.
I did pretty well. That was good. 3 out of 3. I think that's
That was
perfect.
solid. That was solid.
I did have to phone a friend a couple of times. I don't know if we need to rate this movie except to say that it's pretty much a banger.
Yeah.
pretty
I
much a
mean,
banger.
yeah, it's... I don't know what else I can say. I mean, I feel like I've left it all on the field here. Look, this movie does have elements of it that are uncomfortable in, now.
Right.
We can't escape
Well, and
that.
probably we're uncomfortable
But-
then, but it's still an entertaining.
Yes,
thrill
yeah,
ride.
uncomfortable. Yes, you're quite right. Uncomfortable, regardless of of historical context and social mores. It's just those elements of it are unpleasant. But that aside, I think although it was so destructive and difficult for all of these forces that were such powerful creative forces, Bruce Willis,
Yeah.
Joel Silver, Tony Scott, Shane Black, I feel like, isn't the world blessed that happened?
Of course. Well, and I think that this
And it was hard for all involved, but look what we got out of it,
I will take any action movie that aspires to be like a statement about history and LA and who's really that will aspire to be something bigger than itself. And I think most movies do, by the way. I think that it's not fair to say they don't, but I think that this one hits on something that very, very few do. I think it's really as much about its themes as it is about its story. And I think that's pretty amazing. And actually, it's sort of, not that I had him lower in my estimation before, but it really amplifies, I think, Shane Black's just incredible talent.
And that
as
was
an
that was the
artist.
last thing that I sort of wanted to say, because I think this is what puts this over the top is the script, because it's a masterclass in plotting, characterization, and most of all, dialogue.
Yeah.
And I teach Shane Black's stuff in this screenwriting class that I do occasionally. And by the way, if you're ever interested in that, hit me up on Twitter and DM me, and I'll give you the details. I do it occasionally.
The hustle is real on this podcast.
But one of the things I teach you about is not, and this doesn't land in the movies, but it's actually on the page, is his economy of words is absolutely masterful.
Interesting.
There's a script that I sometimes discuss that actually was unmade called Shadow Company, which was what was Lethal Weapon referenced
because
Shadow
the Shadow Company is
but it's a different story.
Yeah.
And there's one line in it that I talk about, which says it describes a fan moving in a hotel room, and it says like not cooling anything, just redistributing the heat. And it's like you're there.
That's an amazing sentence.
You're there,
yeah.
and that's what Shane Black
Did he write
does
any
on
novels?
the page. No, but his scripts feel that way, and they remind me of a little bit of James Salas, who's the writer of Drive, who I've been working with, and his genius is how to do so much with as few words as possible, which is so perfect for hard-boiled noir crime fiction.
Yeah, definitely. And
So-
there's a lot. I mean, there's a little bit of Mamet in that. There's certainly a little bit of Michael Mann in that. And I think my final point of comparison is that I think there's more people, rightfully so, love Michael Mann. I think increasingly people are starting to have the same feelings around Tony Scott, and I just think it's probably at the end here a nice moment to say, rest in peace, Tony Scott. Just
Yes.
one of the greats who will come up again, but is one of the greats.
It's dedicated to you, to your memory, to
Right.
your incredible filmography, and his commentaries as well, which are the best film score you could ever wish for. Is buy Tony
should
Scott's
listen to those.
movies, listen to his commentaries. There's such an insight into his warmth, his generosity of spirit. And his absolute filmmaking craft, dedication to research, attention to detail, love for actors, just everything that made him such a special human being.
Would you want to be Tony Scott's son or Joel Silver's son? Have you thought about it?
Well, that's kind of because I love my dad, so I don't like.
Yeah, your dad introduced you to all these things.
Exactly. So I wouldn't want anyone other than my dad as much as I love these folks.
Right. If you've listened to all hour and 30-something minutes of this podcast, you should rate, review, and subscribe it wherever you get your podcasts. Biggest thing you can do, tell your dad, because he probably likes these movies. Tell a friend. Let people know. Review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you do it. It does help the show grow and get higher up in the charts, more listens. People will see it. They'll go, ooh, what's this Die Hard on a Blank? I want to listen to that. That's what we want. But the most important thing you can do is tell someone who loves action movies to listen to the show. You can find us on Twitter. Phil, where are you on Twitter these days?
I'm at Philip Gawthorne.
You're lurking in the comments?
Yeah, I'm just sort of around, skulking at the side, like when people go to a party and there's people awkwardly standing, they don't want to dance. That's me on Twitter.
But they're getting very drunk.
Yeah, so it all works out.
Yeah. At Philip Gawthorne.
Yeah, just at Philip Gawthorne on Twitter. Yeah.
I am at Liam G. Billingham on Twitter. I'm also at on Letterboxd, where I am cataloging each one of these films as we watch it and building a master list and linking to the films. You can leave comments there on the movies. You can reach out to us on Twitter and Instagram at our accounts, or at DieHardOAB on Twitter, Instagram. You can email us your thoughts. We'd love to hear what you think of this movie. DieHardOAB@gmail.com. Next time on the show.
Next time we're doing...
Wait, actually, sorry. Next time on the show, it says The Last Boy Scout on the paper here.
Sorry.
So no, does that mean we're just going to talk about The Last Boy Scout?
Yes, we're doing it again every week.
This is now a Last Boy Scout.
More Milo
pod.
impressions,
Yeah.
more profanity.
More fuck faces, more assholes.
That was an error. It's been a long week. The next movie we're doing is Hard Boiled.
Oh.
John Woo's 1992 masterpiece.
Masterpiece?
Yeah.
I almost just said, where are you with John Woo? But I desperately need this recording to end. So I'm not going to ask you that question.
Let's leave it there.
Yeah, that's fair.
Come and join us next week.
Okay. I'm Liam Billingham.
I'm Philip Gawthorne.
We will be back next time with some new FBI guys. Bye-bye. Die Hard on a Blank is a podcast hosted and written by Philip Gawthorne. Liam Billingham co-hosts and produces the show. Mike Mayer and Michael Sugar are the executive producers. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at DieHardOAB. Please rate, review, and subscribe and follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. Special thanks to Suki Chu and the whole team at Sugar 23. See you next time on Die Hard on a Blank.